For anyone who keeps bees, it all kicks off with one single, pretty fundamental choice. What kind of home are you actually going to build for your colony? It seems so simple, but believe me, this one decision basically splits the entire beekeeping world right in two. So what is the perfect home for a honeybee? Is it like a sprawling mansion with tons of room to grow? Or is it more of a compact, efficient space that's just way easier to manage? This is the big question, right at the center of a debate that pits decades of tradition against a whole wave of modern, really practical thinking. On one side, you've got the double. This is two deep boxes stuck right on top of each other. It's the traditional, old-school setup, designed to give the queen plenty of room and the colony a ton of space for winter food. And on the other side, you've got the single, a modern, kind of streamlined approach that's lighter and, as its fans will tell you, a whole lot smarter to manage. All right, so let's dive into the classic approach first, the one that's been the standard for generations and generations of beekeepers. For years, for a long, long time, the prevailing wisdom was pretty simple. A bigger hive is a better hive. The double deep setup was seen as the best way to sort of mimic a natural, spacious tree cavity, giving the bees absolutely everything they could possibly need. And you see this sentiment literally everywhere. Just like this beekeeper on Reddit puts it, the logic is all about growth and trying to prevent swarms. The idea is simple. More space equals a bigger colony and a happier queen who isn't tempted to just pack up and leave with half your bees. So, to boil it all down, the key argument for the bigger is better crowd is this. You get more room for eggs, which means a bigger potential population. You get tons of space for honey to get the colony through the winter, and in theory, all this space keeps the bees from feeling cramped and deciding to swarm. It's a compelling, time-tested argument. But is it the whole story? Because, well, a whole new school of thought has been bubbling up, one that really challenges this conventional wisdom. It argues that beekeeping should be smarter, not necessarily bigger. And hey, this isn't just some theory people are kicking around. Beekeepers are actually putting it into practice. Take this user from Georgia, for example, who made the switch and found the single-box hive was a huge improvement. This is a story you hear more and more often. People trying just one single as an experiment and then converting their entire bee yard. And when you look at the benefits of a single box, they are just incredibly practical. For one, it's half the weight, which is a total back saver for the beekeeper. Inspections are way faster because the queen and the brood are all concentrated in one area. But here's where it gets really critical: colony health. Parasite treatments are more effective and cheaper in a smaller space, and there's less empty room for nasty pests like the small hive beetle to go and hide. So you've got tradition on one side and modern pragmatism on the other. It is the perfect setup for a scientific showdown. And luckily for us, researchers have put this very debate to the test. A 2018 study in the Journal of Economic Entomology looked at this exact question, especially for commercial pollination. And their conclusion? It was a bombshell. They found that single-box hives could provide the exact same level of pollination as doubles. The big takeaway here? It's not the size of the box that matters most. It's the health and the population of the bees inside it. And get this? One of the study's most surprising findings was all about efficiency. When scientists measured pollen collection on a per-frame basis, they found that bees in single-box hives were actually more efficient. This kind of suggests that in a more compact space, the colony might just be better organized and more focused on getting out there and foraging. But science is never quite that simple. The study also showed that results can really vary. In 2014, the doubles were much larger, just like you'd expect. But in 2015, the populations were nearly equal, and the singles actually had more sealed brood. That's more baby bees on the way. This tells us that other factors, things like colony health and what's going on in the environment, are playing a huge role, maybe even a bigger one than the hive setup itself. And that brings us to the real heart of the matter. Perhaps this whole debate about one box versus two is just distracting us from the much, much bigger threats that honeybees are facing today. Seriously, forget the hive debate for a second, because this is what's keeping beekeepers up at night. This graph, it's from a local beekeeping newsletter, shows one person's desperate week-by-week battle against a parasite. That blue line is the mite count, and that little red line at the bottom, that's the threshold for survival. As you can see, it's a losing fight. And the enemy has a name, Varroa destructor, and trust me, it is perfectly named. This parasitic mite latches onto bees, it feeds on their fatty tissues, and it transmits deadly viruses. It is, and this is not an exaggeration, the single greatest threat to honeybees across the entire globe. The impact of Varroa and all these other stressors is just staggering. In one recent winter, commercial beekeepers in the US reported an average colony loss of 62%. Just think about that for a second. More than half of all commercial colonies died. That's not a sustainable business model. That's a full-blown crisis. And look, this isn't just a problem for beekeepers. This affects all of us. This chart shows the cost of renting bee colonies to pollinate crops. Look at that yellow line for almonds. As bees die off, the cost of pollination skyrockets, and that cost gets passed directly to you and me at the grocery store. So, where does this leave us? Well, it suggests that surviving as a beekeeper in the 21st century is less about following rigid rules and more about a constant, really delicate balancing act. Expert beekeeper and biologist Randy Oliver, he puts it best. In his very blunt, very colorful way, he says it just doesn't seem to matter that much to the bees what kind of box you give them. The equipment you choose says more about you, the beekeeper, than it does about what the bees actually need to be successful. The truth, as Oliver notes, is that beekeeping isn't some simple formula. There's no one right way to do it. It's a lifelong process of learning, of adapting, and of just accepting that, yeah, whatever can go wrong probably will. Success really depends on the beekeeper's knowledge, their attention, and their ability to respond to what the colony needs in that moment. So, while that whole debate over single versus double hives is fascinating, maybe it's the wrong question. In a world where bees are facing parasites, pesticides, and a changing climate, perhaps the future of beekeeping isn't about finding the perfect box, but about fostering resilience, both in our bees and, in ourselves.